Are you tired of being overcharged and forced into paying a monthly subscription for your Mac and Windows software? Well, if you are, currently we're having a 50% off discount on all the latest Mac and Windows software, such as AutoCAD, SolidWorks, Photoshop, Microsoft Office, and much more. Our 50% off discount will be ending soon.
So be sure to text Ready to Buy, that's Ready to Buy, to the number on the screen. Starting pricing for low-end software, $100. And starting pricing for high-end software, $500.
We aim to please, so expect 24/7 technical support, the latest premium software, instant software links delivered to your email, and PayPal's buyer's protection guarantee.
That's right. My next guest is the brother that I met some years back, man. I feel like I've known you like 13 years or something like that now, man. It's been a while. Yeah, this is a good brother right here, man. You know, everybody that I know speaks highly of him. He's somebody that is just known to help brothers and get them into certain positions, and we're going to talk about that. But I think he first came on a lot of people's radar for initially being falsely accused in the murder of Jason Jam Master Jay Mizell. Just recently, a third person was charged in the 2002 murder. A man by the name of Jay Bryant was charged along with two other men, one being Carl Jordan Jr. and another being, I think his last name is Washington. I'm not sure what his first name is. Yeah. Anyway, Carl Jordan Jr. is actually the son of somebody that I know, Big D, and I'm wondering if Scoon knows Big D as well. He almost has to. We're going to find all of this out. So listen, with no further ado, I'd like to welcome my brother to the show. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Godcast, my brother, Curtis Scoon.
Peace to the God. What's up,
Hang on,
man?
there's a little delay on my end. It's coming in. Peace.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
How you, my brother?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm feeling real good today.
Yeah, you should be, man. You purchased yourself a new vehicle that you're gonna be picking up after this show, huh?
Yeah. Little something, man. Little something. I'm long overdue. I'm long overdue.
Hey,
man.
I like to call it. Me and my boy call it. We say it feels right. It feels right when that shit happens.
Right.
I just got me a feels right a couple of weeks ago. I just got me a new Range or whatever to replace my older Range. So I know the feeling of that feels right feeling. You know what I mean?
Yes,
and you're about to go get your shit, and you know what I mean? You just feel good. Feels right.
Mm-hmm.
Heck 9, shout out to Heck 9. Thank you. Peace, God. He said peace to the family. Yes, sir. Well, that's good that you're in a good mood. Yeah, so we're just gonna talk, man. Let's take it back. Let's go back to the origins of Curtis Scoon. Where did you grow up at? And tell me about that era that you grew up in.
I grew up in Hollis.
What was it like in the times that you grew up?
Yeah, I grew up in Hollis, Queens.
Shout out to Hollis, Queens. My light from Hollis, Queens.
I remember as a young kid, we actually had street gangs in New York City, and they used to wear their colors, the jackets in the 70s. I wasn't old enough to be in a street gang. I missed it by a couple years. Not that I wish that I was, but I remember it vividly. And The movie The Warriors, I believe, was inspired by the street gangs in New York. You had the Tomahawks and the Seven Crowns and the Seven Immortals and the Sex Boys, all of them, right? So that was the era, and everybody wasn't as flashy back then. Life was simpler, and the things that distinguished you were more or less if you could dress good, if you could fight good, if you could dance good, things of that nature. You know what I mean? Like, people didn't really rely on the materialism back then because no one really had a lot of material items.
Now, when you say dress
clothes.
good, what do you mean by dress good? How would we dress good back then?
Oh man, it might have been a Lee bell bottoms and some Pumas, some Clydes or something like that. And I remember the Clydes because I would pay $21 for them, and that was considered a lot of money.
Yes,
you would get Chuck Taylors for about $12, and man, you had to wait till you had holes in your shoes before you got some new ones. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember the Pro Keds. Remember the Pro Keds?
That's right, Royal Crown. Listen,
Royal.
man, look. It was so different and simpler back then. I'm not saying it was better because everybody, they have their own experience and they value it the way they value it. But it was very different and simpler back then. There wasn't a lot of pressure on everyone to be, a mogul, a billionaire, or none of that, man. So it was kids being kids, not kids pretending to be business magnets and things like that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, what kind of household did you grow up in? Like, did you grow up in like in the projects? Did you grow up in like a middle class? Like, describe, a single parent home? What kind of home did you grow up in? Brothers and sisters, all of that?
Look, man, Queens has a lot of houses. And typically when you moved from Brooklyn, you got your weight up, you would move out to Queens. Or if you really got your weight up, you would go out to Long Island, right?
Facts.
So a lot of people would disparage us for having backyards and things like that. I remember back in the day, they would be like, Queens, like Queens is soft because, we got houses.
Quiet Queens.
Quiet Queens. Yeah, all of that. But to answer your question, I grew up with my mom, my stepfather, and my siblings and step sister and step brothers. You know what I mean? It was 7 of us. I would say middle class, but I don't really know. My stepfather was pretty good with his hands. My mom didn't work. So it was 7 kids, mom and dad in a house. Dobermans in the backyard. It was different. It was different back then. I think the mortgage might have been about $100 a month. My stepfather might have been making about, and that's a house that today is worth about $700,000. But back then, the mortgage was like $100, 100 and change. And my stepfather may have been earning about, I don't know, $300 a week. And he could take care of a family of 9 with that. You know what I mean? And he wasn't doing anything in the street illegal. He was a mechanic and he did what would be called HVAC today. And you know what I mean? And he could take care of his family and things. The cost of living has risen so much that you almost can't have those kind of jobs and take care of a family that large anymore. So I think life was simpler, but not to go too much off on a tangent, but the 70s was the beginning of the depreciation of the dollar after Richard Nixon took it off the gold standard in 1971.
Fucked us all 15. Up with that.
So it was, you got more out of your money back then than you do now. You really need a lot of money. A lot of people don't know that since the Federal Reserve, the dollar has depreciated more than 95% since 1913. You know what I mean? So it takes a whole lot more dollars to do a lot less because our money is continually devaluing. Yeah. But yeah, that was my household. I went to Catholic school. My parents they're Caribbean. And if you know anything about Caribbean parents, they prioritize education. Not so much having, new sneakers and stuff on the first day of school. No shots at anybody, but that education meant something to them. And I went to Catholic school, and that's where I met Joseph Simmons, Rev Run, and Down McDaniels, DMC. We were in the same class, same grade. From 2nd grade to 8th grade, we were in the same class, the 3 of us, and we actually became really good friends.
Wait. You cut out for a second. You said from 2nd grade to 8th grade, y'all went to school together?
Yeah, in the same class at that. Not just the same school. We were in the same class. Yeah, bro.
Wow.
Those were like really good friends of mine, yeah.
Right. Wow. So, I mean, that's crazy right there. So these are childhood friends. Well, first of all, to keep it real, a lot of childhood friends grow up and end up doing horrible things to each other. You know what I mean? Which is a fucking shame. So all right, let's since we just started talking about them, you grew up and were in the same class with Run-DMC, basically, Jason Mizell. So,
well, Jason went to public school. He wasn't part of our clique. You know what I mean? Yeah. Jason went to public school. I'll break that down for you a little later on in the discussion. But go ahead.
Okay. Well, so Rev Run and DMC was in your class.
Yes, those two. Absolutely. Yeah.
And what kind of kids was they when they was young?
Oh man, DMC was very artistic. If you remember his rhyme, Run said, "I'm DJ Run, I can scratch. I'm DMC, I can draw."
I could draw, right?
Yo, he really could, and he had me on the Silver Surfer in 5th grade. He used to try to do comic books, and I would add the dialogue to it. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and Run. He wanted to DJ. He didn't want to rap. Isn't it? That's why his name is DJ Run.
DJ Run, yeah.
Yeah. When his brother started promoting at places like the Hotel Diplomat and what have you, he was doing those college parties, like Funky Fridays. He had names like that for themes, and and he had them all over. And Run used to work in the coat check room and stuff. And then they just started letting him rap. Yo, because he was originally Curtis Blow was Russell's main talent, and I remember the flyers used to say Curtis Blow and his disco son DJ Run. A lot of people
son of Curtis Blow.
A lot of people don't even really understand that how rap was really more affiliated and influenced by disco. Like you had the disco fever in the Bronx and all that. You know what I mean? Like there was a lot of disco influence and references in the early days of rap in the 70s. And then later on, it started morphing into its own thing. But yeah, I remember that.
Well, real quick, to talk about that real quick. Hang on real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Because technically the disco and the discotheque are two different things. Disco is the actual music. The discotheque is where they played various music, not just disco. Okay. And hip hop, although we used to use the breaks. So a lot of that shit wasn't disco, although it was being played in a discotheque because that's where you had to hear it at. You know what I mean? A lot of people, when they look at they'll look at Rapper's Delight and say that hip hop came from disco, kind of. You know what I mean? And that was a thing. Like that shit was disco, but we was really on those soul. Hip hop really started with the soul breaks, you know what I mean? So
look, let me say this, man. The Fat Boys, they called themselves the Disco 3.
Listen, my first DJ name was Kid Disco.
Oh, okay. Look.
But I wasn't really a disco dude. Disco was the record, you know what I mean? I was a DJ.
Okay, Jamar, let me add this then. Do you think the popularity of disco, maybe it wasn't disco per se, but because disco was so popping, hip hop kind of leaned on it, kind of clout chased a little bit. Do you know?
A little bit, yes. Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. That's the influence there. No, it wasn't the same music. And by the way, Niles Rodgers, who made Good Times, which was the track for Rapper's Delight.
Right. He didn't even like hip hop.
He was a disco producer, you know.
Right.
So there's some overlap there, you know. And I'll leave it to people like yourself who really know and study this. I just remember it as a spectator. And
Right.
I went to the Disco Fever in the Bronx. No, they were not playing disco music.
Exactly, but it was
We-
called the Disco Fever, but they was smoking dust in there,
that's
and they
right.
was
Yeah,
playing nothing but that hardcore
yeah,
underground shit.
yeah, for sure. But but in any event, man, the music was so influential, and Russell was right there, and his timing was right, and Run being his younger brother, his timing was right, and he was in the right place at the right time, and he was doing his thing with Curtis Blow, and next thing you know, man, he talked to his brother, and he wanted to form a group. Russell being the entrepreneur that he is, and he was at a very young age, he he told him to make a group, and Run did what? He went with DMC. Jay was not part of the original group. They wouldn't even allow Jay to show his face on the original album cover because he wasn't on paperwork. And the truth of the matter is, there was another individual named Nelly D, Donnell Smith, who was supposed to be the DJ because he was from 25th in Hollis and he used to DJ block parties. But he went to Job Corps instead of being with Run DMC because nobody thought rap was really that big back then, you know. And he went to Job Corps, and of course he didn't stay. But by the time he came back, that window had closed, and Jay filled that void. Now Jay went to public school. Jay was he lived on the block of Run's first wife. I think her name is Val, right? And that's how Run got to know him. What Run needed was some kind of like connection to the hood because we weren't from the hood. We went to Catholic school. You know what I mean? I knew a little bit more people than them because I lived right there in the center. I lived on 22nd, and 23rd was like the heart of Hollis, right? And Run used his brain and he recruited Jay, who also used to DJ, but Jay wasn't as good as Nelly D. But he recruited Jay because Jay would give Run and DMC ties to the street guys. Not that Jay was so much a street guy, but Jay was more a cool dude, more so than like, you know, a gangster. He was cool with the gangsters. They liked him.
Right.
So if you put Jay in your group, now the group gets a pass with Jay. And that was the strategic positioning of Jam Master Jay in the group when it first started. Russell did not want to put Jay on paperwork, but Run fought for it, and it happened. And that's for real. You know, I haven't talked to Run in many years. He's a different kind of guy. Honestly, me being 100%, D has always been, of the three, D has always been the most genuine person, right? Yeah. And that's not to knock anybody else, but D has been the most down to earth man. You see D'll kick it with you like you wouldn't even think this dude had the role he had in hip hop, right? And Run is charismatic, man. He's like he's like most front men in groups. You know what I'm saying? Like he got a little ego, but he got a lot of ego and all that. But he's smart.
Right.
He understood business, and he was definitely the leader of that group. I'm going to tell you the truth all the way around the board. There would have been no Run DMC without Joseph Simmons, Reverend Run. You know,
I mean, he had the energy. As soon as you heard him on all the records on Sucker MC 2 years ago, like honestly, if you know, at the time, if DMC's part never came in, we wouldn't have been mad. You know what I mean? But when he came in with that I'm DMC in the place, it was like, okay, like that's, you know, but homeboy, you see that Run's rhyme is a lot longer. You know what I mean?
Charisma.
And they used to go with that back and forth shit. Like they used to use Run's voice over DMC's voice because sometimes if you just left it with DMC, it was the energy was lacking a little bit. So he would jump in there, the crap, the rap, it's Run's, you know what I mean? Like
he carried. And no disrespect to anybody. And I told you, I like D personally the best as individual, but Run artistically carried both J and D in that group, man. And that's why.
Although I still think he needed a group. I don't know if
Oh,
he
he
would have been a
did.
good solo MC.
Nah, he
You
did
know what I
need a
mean?
group. Yeah, he did need a group. He
Yeah.
did. He did. So they started making their mark, and I often say, and again, a lot of people don't like this. Hip hop started in the Bronx. It did. But when you look at Flash and Bambaataa and them, they were trying to connect, in my opinion, with the mainstream, and Running them came and took it right back to the street element.
Yep.
You know what I mean? And in hindsight, that's exactly what made rap blow up. Because it seemed like the people in the Bronx, they wanted to escape and go funk like Parliament or no disrespect to Flash, but I compare them to the Village People sometimes. The way they used to dress and dance,
and rightly so. And I felt conflicted about that at that time. Like, I wanted to be a rapper since the inception of rap. I didn't know that these guys dressed like that until I went to my first show at Roseland and I saw Soul Sonic Force, right? These niggas came out on stage, Indian suits and planetary shit, and I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, this wasn't what I imagined in my mind, because I used to just get the tapes, you know what I mean, and the wax, and back then you just had to use your imagination. So when I seen this, I was like, damn, I'm conflicted. Then when I start seeing pictures of, Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel, and they got these leather on and whips and chains and all kinds. And I'm like, damn, I want to be a rapper, but I don't want to have to dress like that. So when Run-DMC came out, it was freeing. First of all, because let's keep it real. Even if you said, I'm willing to put that shit on that they was wearing, that shit wasn't cheap. Like leather pants and fucking like, where's a regular kid gonna be able to even find that shit? Even if you had the money, where are you getting this a top made of handcuffs and like some leather pants with some fucking cheetah boots on? Like, where do you even find that shit? So them niggas was shopping in some shit where the average motherfucker couldn't go. When you saw Run-DMC, you're like, yo, they're wearing the shit that I seen that at VIMs. Like, they got the Lee suits.
Took me back. Yo, look.
They got the Lee suits at VIM. That's what Run-DMC is wearing.
Yeah.
Now all we got to do is figure out where they're getting them fucking Stetson hats. And I think I know, if we go to 42nd Street, we can get them hats too.
Yeah.
No, 34th is where the Stetson store was at. Matter of fact, my bad. Herald Square.
They influenced the game. And I don't try to take credit from nobody. I just try to tell the truth, right? The dudes like Flash and them, what they started is not what they wanted to do. They wanted to assimilate into something else. So when I hear them griping a lot nowadays, I'd be like, y'all didn't even want to do this.
Right.
Y'all wanted to do something else, man. Y'all wanted to be on the big stage with Earth, Wind, and Fire and all that. There's nothing wrong with that. But because somebody took what you initiated and took it in a different direction and made it bigger than anything you ever thought it could be.
Because you didn't have faith in this.
And they didn't have the vision, bro. That's right. They didn't have the faith and they didn't have the vision. So you got to give credit to where it's due. That's why I was instrumental in that book, Queens Reign Supreme, because I understood the role that Queens played in bringing hip hop to the world. And the people in Queens, the artists, were influenced by the street guys in Queens. Earlier, we were talking about how it was quiet Queens, but then when crack came, that was a different era. Crack took off in Queens. And the same reason it was called quiet Queens is why it took off. Because the more affluent your clientele, the more money you stand to make. So whereas in poor neighborhoods like in East New York and Brooklyn, they were waiting for the 1st and the 15th, in Queens, you're dealing with people that got jobs. So every weekend, now you got money to make. And the
Mm.
Queens drug dealers started making more money than their peers in other more impoverished sectors of the
Now
city.
that's a perspective that I've never heard.
Mhm.
And like when I think about it right now, it makes perfect sense. It makes
Absolutely.
perfect sense. A lot of other, like you said, they had to wait till the 1st of 15 to niggas get their welfare checks and all of that type
Mhm.
of shit. Or if a nigga come up on the lick in between that type of shit. But if you got people that got jobs, you know, and every week they're buying crack and shit like, yo. And then you got the 1st and 15th too on top of that.
Listen,
Whoa.
I
That
seen it at play.
explains a lot. That explains a lot.
I saw it at play all around the country. DC was the reason why they got so much money in DC is because of all the government jobs. The reason why they got so much money in Detroit was because of all the auto industry jobs. So wherever you have an affluent clientele base,
Atlanta.
you're gonna make your money. So the
Mm.
dudes in the real rundown parts of town, they're not gonna get money like the cats that's closer in proximity to more affluent, stable people. But the inverse of that, the flip side of that is the drug dealer destabilized some of our most productive communities by selling drugs in those communities. Queens end up going from quiet Queens to changing the damn drug laws in the country. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, it's not anything to be boastful about. Again, I just try to be truthful as I've witnessed it, as I've experienced it. And that was the thing in Queens. And then when you had the TNT, Technical Narcotics Task Force,
Thank you, brother Cody.
They focused on Queens. And at that point, so many dudes from Queens were getting locked up that now, instead of it being quiet Queens, Queens started being deep in the system on Rikers Island, upstate. And that started shifting things. Now it was no more quiet Queens. It was like Queens is in the building. Because let's just be real. The strength are in numbers, man. A lot of people always talk about this area is tough and so on and so forth. When you have a dense population, you're going to have a lot more of everything. You're going to have a lot more killers, a lot more gangsters, a lot more suckers. You're going to have a lot more of everything. So when those numbers started like building up from getting arrested by the NYPD, focusing on Queens drug lords like the Supreme Team and 40 Projects and Fat Cat and others, Hollis not so much. We got money in Hollis, but Hollis was kind of like a no man's land where anything goes, and nobody even tried to set up shop in Hollis because it was so ignorant in Hollis. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they say the only thing worse than organized crime is disorganized crime. Hollis had a lot of disorganized crime. You know what I mean? But that's how it was, man. It was a very, very different time. And also, again, none of this is a boast. I'm just presenting the data and the facts. From 1985 to like 1992, the murder rate in New York because of the crack in New York City, it went from like 1,600, 1,700 in 85, and it progressively increased every year. By 1991 or 92, it had been 2,248 in 1 year. We're talking about 6 murders a day for an entire year. See, from like 88, it was like over 2,000, but it peaked around 92 with over 2,200. None of it is a boast, but it's to give the listeners an idea of what the climate was like
right
at that time. It was I didn't live through the Roaring 20s, but I've seen the movies, and I would compare the 80s to what the Roaring 20s was portrayed like in film, with Prohibition and the speakeasies and the Tommy guns and just reckless violence and mayhem all over the place. The 80s was a very, very different time. And I came of age in the 80s. In 1984, I turned 20 years old. And today, I can say that, and this is a matter of fact, this is not a matter of pride, that I know, well, at least 30, 35 people that I knew were murdered, right? Not close friends, but I knew of them. I knew them. I seen them. And on top of that, I actually know 2 cop killers. That it's not because of the circle so much. We're talking about the climate in New York City, and not just New York City, because at that time they were calling DC the murder capital. I was in DC too around that time in Baltimore. It was just violent everywhere, and the drugs and the young men who were introduced to the drugs, because with heroin you had to kind of like be an older guy. They had more structure, but with cocaine and crack, you had this influx of young guys, and there was no structure for real. Anybody could just get a package and try to flip it, and they bump heads, and it'd be no kind of order, man. Not for real. In some places they had some, but really there was no vetting process. So anybody and everybody got involved, and the outcome was the chaos that we saw.